Hi, everybody. This is Lauren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal. And with me today, I have Nick Wilsdon of, what's your current company's name now, Nick?
Uh,
Torque?
yeah, my current company is Talk Partnership, which is a consultancy. But yeah, I've been obviously I've been working for a few other companies that people will know me from, Vodafone, eBay, to name a couple.
Excellent, excellent. So, for those of you that have been on here for a while waiting for the webinar to start, you may have seen that we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. We're going to be driving on our side while Nick is running through the slides on his side, but it should all be just fine. And then, Christina, if you wouldn't mind going to the next title slide. There we go. Okay, so we'll get it going, folks. We have it all together now. So let me restart. Hi, everybody. This is Lauren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal. With me today, I have Nick Wilsdon, who many of you may know from his Vodafone and eBay fame. Nick, I think I first met you during the days of ThreadWatch, when ThreadWatch was owned by Nick Wilson. And I
Yes,
kept
that's
on
right.
getting you mixed up with Nick Wilsdon. I'm sorry, with Nick Wilson. And
So you've done it again. There you go, Lauren.
yeah,
Poor
I
Nick.
just did it again. It's going on 2 decades now. So
Yeah,
I'm not sure if I'm the only one or not, but
it's
we
happening
get it
quite
mixed
a few
up.
times. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think me and Nick are very good friends, so that's fine.
Oh, okay.
We're sort of
Excellent.
happy. We're both OGs, I guess, like you.
Excellent. Excellent. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. We gave everyone a chance to kind of get in here. Everything looks under control now. This is a SEJ webinar brought to you by our partners with SEMrush and Torque Partnership. Today, Nick's going to be reviewing how to get more from Google Data Studio utilizing SEMrush, and a lot in the Google Data Studio at the end of the day, which is really exciting for me. It's something that I underutilize, and I'm always looking for a chance to utilize things more. But before Nick gets started, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping and give some other folks time to kind of get in here a little bit late. Our official hashtag, as you can see, is hashtag SEJ webinar. Please feel free to share any screenshots or thoughts of today's presentation on Twitter. Tag us accordingly. We'll go ahead and retweet you if you tag us. So that's a good reason to do so right there. And then also be sure to tag Nick. You see his handle at Nick Wilsdon, which is really easy to type in. So really excited to see the action that we have going on Twitter today. Over the course of Nick's presentation, which should last about 20 to 25 minutes, we'll have 3 poll questions. We always really ask our attendees to be active in our polls. It helps not only give an idea of what you're doing out there from a marketing and SEO perspective, but it also helps Nick craft his delivery a little bit and helps us a little bit to prepare for the Q&A session, which will be after Nick's presentation. So speaking of the Q&A session, as you have questions, as they come up during the course of the presentation, please feel free to type them into the question box on your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll then be going through those and discussing them actively after the presentation is done. And then any questions that come up, whether it's specific to Nick's presentation or since we have the great Nick Wilsdon on here for a good hour, any other questions you have for Nick outside of today's presentation, please go ahead and type them in as well. On that note, I'm going to end my introduction and hand things off to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lauren. That's very kind of you. Okay, I'll just give you a bit of an introduction, first of all, to myself. If go to the next slide. Yep. So I've been working in SEO since 2001. So yeah, I think maybe slightly after Lauren started. I've led and built network teams at Arena Media, Havas and Dentsu, and I've led the global SEO program across Vodafone Group with 22 countries to over 516 million mobile customers. I've worked as a consultant, technical SEO mostly, to Vodafone partner markets, eBay and Acronis International. And at the moment, as Lauren said, I'm basically behind my venture, which is a Talk Partnership, which is a network of senior digital consultants. So that's hopefully why you should listen to me. What I'll try and do in this seminar is I want to show you a bit about SEMrush, the connector that they make available. I'm a massive fan of Google Data Studio, so this is a part of SEMrush that I've been using a bit for my presentations. So what I want to do is make this really practical and show you what I've been doing with it, and hopefully I can answer some of the questions that you may get when you try and copy these steps. As I said, this will be really kind of hands-on and practical, so I'm assuming knowledge of Data Studio, and you can have this presentation afterwards to follow along, so don't worry about taking too many notes. So the connector for Data Studio for SEMrush, it covers three main areas. You have positioning tracking, which is the one on the left, okay, Christina, and you have animations, and you have domain analytics, the one in the middle, and we have site audit data, the one on the right. Now, I tend to focus on domain analytics, is the one that interests me particularly. Site audits are quite useful, but at enterprise level, I tend to find that I do my own kind of custom audits. So domain analytics is the one that I really like. So if we go to the next slide. And you can see here, this is what the domain overview gives you. It lets you know background data on links. You can find out all kinds of things. You find out the visibility, the estimated rank. And the bit that I'm really interested in is this bit that you can see on the right-hand side, which shows you visibility and number of keywords. So I can do, with this data, I can do research on my own domains, or I can do research across competitor domains. So this is a bit that I tend to use a lot of. Yeah, go next. So what can you get, what can you do with this data and what do you get from it? As I mentioned, this very specific data set, and there's several data sets within this connector. So I'll just talk about this one data set. You can get organic keywords, the number of these keywords and the positions, and they're usually broken down by 1 to 3, 4 to 10. You get the estimated traffic from SEMrush, and you get the cost, and they do that by obviously their own internal calculations to work out the relative cost of those organic placements. And you also get Google Ads traffic and cost as well. SEMrush covers 121 Google CCTLDs and 18 mobile versions of Google. Now that tends to be really useful for me because I do a lot of international work, and the coverage that SEMrush has internationally is really, really useful. So that's a big feature for me. The fact that you've got mobile indexes here as well is going to be quite useful for the mobile update in March, which is obviously coming up. So having an idea of visibility and keywords within mobile is something that they can give you. So it's great for doing top level reporting across multiple domains. So as I tend to do, for example, large scale migrations, I'll do that across 40 or 50 domains at a time. So this is a good way for me to get that viewpoint within Data Studio without setting each one of those up as a separate project within SEMrush, which would obviously hit my project limits. So that's how I tend to use it. Next. Now, this is an example of the kind of visualizations that I tend to go for. So you can see here, I've got, this actually represents a migration that we carried out. This was a CCTLD migration into a COM. So we were moving everything from the CCTLDs and aggregating into a COM structure. So .com / ENGB, com / FRFR. And this is the kind of data that I'd want to show from that migration. So you're looking here at, on the left-hand side, as we migrate, the number of keywords, organic keywords, and the average traffic is declining. And then as we'd hope, the average organic keywords and organic traffic is increasing on the COM. And what we'd want to do is to see the end result being greater than the culmination of the two. So we'd want to see a greater result for migrating that content. And you can see here how we'd represent that in the number of keywords, because on the left, you can see that we didn't have many 1 to 3 positions. And in the data on the right, we start to get a much stronger result in October, November, where we've got far more 1 to 3 positions for that migration. So that would kind of indicate a success. And I'd be doing this across multiple domains. This would be represented in Data Studio for 30 or 40 times across all, to give you that top level view across the migration. Next. So as I said, the first thing you do, and we can go through and click these. So 1, we get the domain history data set. There you go, Christina. And then 2, put in your domain. It's very easy. Now, the important limitation here is to remember that SEMrush at the moment only lets you look at root domains. you can't look at exact URLs or subdomains or subfolders. So this is a limitation at the moment, and you obviously haven't got as much flexibility as you have in the main tool. So definitely start telling them that they need to introduce this flexibility. And then 3, you have the ability to set those parameters to be editable once you put it into Data Studio. So this gives you a lot more flexibility because you can choose those parameters, and you've got to use the same connection for every single site that you want to query. Next, please. And this is what you get when you put that first into Data Studio, and it's very spiky and not very useful. So the very first problem that you get is why does it look like that? And this is just a very basic tip. I'll start off with some easy tips for people who aren't so familiar with Data Studio. What I tend to do is then put this into a table. If you click, Christina. Yeah, you can see the spikes, and then click again, you'll see here. So put your data into a table, and this tends to be a really good recommendation. If you ever get stuck with Data Studio, put everything into a table. And when you do this, you start to see what the problem is, where we can see that the data only comes through once a month. So it comes through on the 15th, and that's why we have these spikes. So the solution here is to use a different date format from the get-go. So I'll show you how to do that. We'll go to the next slide, but remember the 15th because we're going to need that later on. So the first thing we do, we'll go through these steps. So number 1, we set the dimension for the date, and I set that with a year month, and that will smooth out your graph and give you something that looks a lot more like the example that you can get off their site. Number 2, I select organic keywords, organic traffic. Number 3, I select the date. What you'll find is that the date ranges within the data sets do vary. So depending on the data that SEMrush has, you'll get different amounts. You usually always get 12 months, but you may find in some cases you've got a couple of years or 3 years worth of data, but it very much varies by the locale version of Google. And then we select the parameters, number 4. And again, because we've allowed these to be edited, we can then put in Turkey. So this one's querying google.com.tr, and you put in your specific domain name that you want to query in Google's Turkey index. So next slide. And then what I tend to do is I go into the style section and I set the axis, which is number 1, on both sides, which makes it a bit clearer. And then I do quite like using the reference lines. I think they're really useful. So if you go to number 2, yeah, you can see here that you can have reference lines within Data Studio now. So the reference line, I'm actually taking a metric, which is the number of organic keywords, and I'm taking an average of that. So I can see very quickly when I look at that graph, what is the average? So I can see the average number of keywords and the average amount of traffic. And when I have the 2 graphs next to each other for the ccTLD and the .com, I can quickly see whether the averages are exceeding on the .com. If we go to the next slide. And here's the keywords. We've got the grouping here within that data set. So number 1, I set it to year, month for the date. The second one, number 2, I pick out the position options that I want. So I've got a few of them there. There's obviously, it'll give you everything from 1 to 100 grouped into those, usually grouped into roughly 10, apart from 1 to 3, 4 to 10. So you've got to choose about how many of those you have, and I'll show you a tip to make that a bit cleaner later on, because obviously you might not want to put all 100 on this graph because it would start to look a little bit busy. And then I set again the parameters on number 3, which is very simple, same way we did last time. So next slide. So I've got a quick poll question to check if you're listening, which I'll expect 100% correct answers on. So you got the poll question, Lauren?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. So I'm just going to start with the first one on here.
Oh, yep.
Is
Sorry,
this correct, or do you want to do another one?
No, it's another one.
Okay.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. No, sorry. Yeah, that is fine. Sorry, that's fine. Yep, go back to that one. I do apologize.
Okay.
Oh,
apologize here, Nick. Apologies here, Nick. We have to go to the next one.
Oh, okay. All
right. Should I do the what can you not include in blended data at the moment, or would you like me to hold off?
We'll do it on the next one. That's fine. Okay. The poll question here is you've got some limitations in SEMrush. So what are the obvious limitations you have with SEMrush? Is it the API usage is too great? Is it that the data is only available for certain dates? Or is it that is it that the domain history API only lets you query the root domain? Which one do you think is the main limitation? How do we answer this poll, Bernard?
Well, the first poll actually was
Oh,
shared and then closed, so it
okay, yeah,
no
no
longer
problem.
is doable.
Let's move on. That's fine.
Oh, no, we have
Love,
some answers coming in. So mostly the last one, number three, the last one.
they're absolutely right. That is a
C,
limitation, and
don't
they're
be.
very clever. They're a very clever audience. See, they can work off the hoof. And the reason I want you to know this is because I want you all to be talking to SEMrush to get them to allow us to query more forms of URLs, because a lot of us would like to do this on subdomains and subfolders. So I'm kind of giving them a bit of pressure there. So let's make this slightly better now. So we're going to look at blended charts. Now, the one on the left, you can see that again, I'm looking at my CCTLD versus my COM. So this represents a migration. And I've made this better because I put both those views onto the same chart. And this starts to be a bit more powerful because we can start to see when we go through the migration, which I'm sure all of you can see is in October, we can see that the two lines change direction dramatically. And what we're seeing actually in this migration is seeing that the COM is doing far, far better than the CCTLD ever did. So the aggregation is actually working as a strategy, and we can start to prove that's working because if we look at the number of organic keywords here on the left in the COM post migration, we start to see that we're now beginning to get 1 to 3 positions appearing there. So we're getting a far larger number of keywords. So you see we're looking at about 5,000, 5,300 keywords, and we're getting some 1 to 3. We're getting about 130 1 to 3 positions there. And if you look on the right-hand side, the previous CCTLD, we had no 1 to 3 positions at all. And obviously that's dropped off enormously when we've done the aggregation, but this is proof that this methodology works, this tactic works. So this is what we're trying to show the client. We're trying to show them that we've made this change, we've got this migration, and this is what we're seeing now across all these different domains. So this is a very sort of powerful visual to give them. If you go to the next slide. And again, we do this if you go number 1 with the domain history data set again. And the important tip to know about this is that you can't use parameters. If you go click again, oh, sorry, we're going number 2 first, click number 2. It's very important when you get into this that you do have a very clear naming convention. And this will kind of catch you out quite quickly on Data Studio. So I tend to be very careful and come up with a method of for these, it's kind of COM, TRTR, but I come up with a method of naming each one of these data sources very clearly. And you'll see why I do that again a little bit later on. Then if you go to number 3, so here we have unclicked the ability for us to change the parameters when the data source is in Data Studio. And the reason we've done this is because we want to blend this data together, and you can't use parameters in a blend. So, you know, on the downside, that means that we need to create an awful lot of data sources, and this is why we need the clear naming pattern. But we do then have to create a data source for each one of those views that we want to show the client. So you'll create all of these views, and then you'll start to make each one of these charts on your Data Studio page. So let's go to the next one. And this is basically the blend. So we're now blending the data together. We're blending organic keywords, organic traffic together, which is great. I'd say as a tip here, do use unique names when you're blending these together. So on the left, we have CCTLD, the right, we have COM, because it gets very confusing if you don't do that, because they'll largely be called the same thing in the blended column. Let's go to the next slide. And something else that I tend to do here is I go back to the original source, and I find it's easier to actually manage the metrics in the data view source rather than within the chart that you're making. I think that's a better way to approach this. And what I've done here is I've shown you how to do a very basic calculated field. So we've literally just added up organic keywords, position 51 to 100. and that gives us an aggregated number for 51 to 100, which obviously simplifies our visualizations a lot in SEMrush, because we don't want to have all those different listings in our legend. And another quick tip is when you see the field ID up there at the top, the calc, that can be edited manually, which can be a very useful thing to do when you're trying to get charts and data sources to relate to each other. So if we go to the next slide. Yep, so now we'll do the next poll question, which hopefully is there.
Excellent. So which question are we doing this time, Nick? Is it the what can you not include in blended data at the moment?
Yes,
or
that sounds perfect.
That's it?
Definitely that one.
Okay.
Definitely that one, Lauren.
I will go ahead and launch it. All right, it's working this time. So what can you not include in blended data at the moment? Select one of the following, please. Join keys, dimensions, parameters, or date ranges. At about 20% of you have voted. It looks like there may be a clear answer here based upon the results thus far, but I don't want to skew the answer. So I'm going to go ahead and give everyone a chance to go ahead and answer right now.
I'm expecting great things from this audience. So I'm pretty sure they're going to get this right.
Yeah, me too. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, going to go ahead and close and share the results.
Parameters,
69%
absolutely.
said parameters.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. Because you do have to think about this when you're putting together your charts. You know, the lack of parameters in a blend does mean that you're going to create a lot of data sources. And hopefully my next tip, I'll try and show you how to optimize that a little bit.
Excellent.
Cool. Now, this is a really good tip. I actually got this from I got this from Lee Hurst, actually, who showed me this originally in his fantastic book. Yeah, Google Data Studio Guide. It's a very, very good book. And within this book, he talks about the extract data function connector. Now, what the extract data connector is a connector for connectors. So to understand that, it kind of acts as a cache for your data. And obviously that drastically improves report performance, which is really useful. Now, report performance is a huge problem for all of us in Data Studio. Sometimes the reports do go really slowly, especially when you're using data that doesn't come from Google Analytics or Google Tools. You can, of course, speed this up dramatically if you use BigQuery, if you take that data into another source. But if we're actually querying third-party connectors like SEMrush, then sometimes we can find that our report performance does degrade quite rapidly. And it also does when you're doing the kind of overview reports that I tend to do, where I have a few dozen charts on the same page. You'll find that it'll begin to load really slowly. So this is what I'd recommend that you do. You start looking at the extract data connector. You can load this up. It can store up to 100 meg of data, which is great. I've not exceeded that yet. It allows, it sometimes changes your aggregated fields, but that's also a plus because it sometimes allows you to do different things with aggregated data that you couldn't do normally. And it's very useful for data where it's not updating very regularly. And if you remember back, do you remember the data that we looked at for this? It was only updating on the 15th of every month. So that's very infrequent. So you don't really need to be querying that all the time. And if you look at the freshness of this connector from SEMrush, it'll be updating every 12 hours. So that's obviously a bit of an overkill for something that updates monthly. So that again can be incredibly useful. It is very, very useful when you're dealing with providers who charge you on API calls. Because if you can imagine that this data is renewing and refreshing itself every 12 hours, these are your API credits that are getting used up. Now, in this case, SEMrush don't charge you at the moment for connections to Data Studio. So even though it's using their API, it doesn't use their API credits. That's fantastic. I don't know if that's going to change in the future, but I still want to show you this technique because this is very useful for Systrix, for other connectors that I tend to use. So I'd definitely recommend you look into this. So I'll take you through quickly how to use this, and I've given you some links here for further information. So go to the next slide. Now, what we do is we launch the extract data connector as we would any other connector. And firstly, and this is where it comes back to your naming convention. So if you imagine we've been creating data sets for our blend, and maybe we have 40 data sets for our blend. So we've got 2 of those, so maybe 40, 80. We now have to create 80 new extract data sets. So I tend to do that with a naming convention where I put e_com, and I use that kind of naming convention myself to know that it's an extracted data form. You can then choose to delete the original data sources if you want, but remember that whatever you pull in, if you see number 2, whatever you're pulling into the extract data center, the extract connector, that's all the data that you're going to have. So if you're going to delete the original source, then you've got to bring everything in. But if you're looking to be efficient with your API usage, then it may be that you don't want to bring all of those different fields into your connector. So you've got to think about that, how to be kind of efficient with your data usage. So you may find if you're getting charged on API usage, you only want to bring in 1 or 2 fields, and you want to have this updating. And if you go to number 3, the options you have for auto update, you click that on, and you can see here that I've set that to be updated on the 16th. So I know that that data gets refreshed on the 15th. So on the 16th, I refresh it into Data Studio, and that will happen on the same day every month. The last thing to check on this is that you have a last updated note on the bottom right, and that's incredibly useful because when you make a change, you have to save and extract again because this is a cache. So that's almost like a refresh cache function, pretty much. So if you're pulling your hair out because you can't work out why something hasn't changed because you've amended the data source, then go there, check the extract date, and do a save and extract again. Go to the next screen. So yeah, let's do the next poll question, see what we've learned about extract data.
Time for the last poll. So what is the extract data connector good for? Speeding up your dashboards, storing unlimited amounts of data, helping you organize your data sources. So please go ahead and answer right now. 1, speeding up your dashboards. 2, storing unlimited amounts of data. Or 3, helping you organize your data sources. And Nick, thanks for that tip on monitoring being billed per on the API side.
It gets expensive, that. If you, I don't want to point fingers at other people, but it's huge. If you imagine some of your charts have, weekly or daily data points, and you're extracting this over a 12-month period, then every time that refreshes, that can cost a lot.
Yep.
So yeah, it does keep your costs down quite a lot.
Can absolutely add up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. Share the results. 57% of our wonderful audience today says speeding up your dashboards. 34% helping you organize your data sources, and then 9% storing unlimited amounts of data.
Yeah, because you're only limited to 100 meg, so that's the thing to keep. I mean, 100 meg is a lot of data, so you very rarely need to worry about that. But that's it's very useful.
Excellent. Okay, back to the presentation.
Cool. So yeah, so hopefully today this is what you've learned. You've learned how to create some basic graphs from the SEMrush domain history data set. You've learned to blend that data to create more useful visualizations, and you've learned how to improve your dashboard performance to make scalable reports with multiple charts per page. So yeah, I'd welcome any questions that you've got on that. I'm hoping that sort of gets you off to a faster start than the intro page on SEMrush on this.
Excellent. Thanks so much. We have some questions coming in, and for anybody that has further questions, please go ahead and ask them right now. We'll go ahead and get to them. Question number 1, for those of us who are new to Google Data Studio, what is a good way to get started? What's one of the first tools or first benefits that you found utilizing Google Data Studio?
It's a good question. Yeah, the very first thing that you should do with Data Studio, I'm feeling like I should be saying Data Studio. Data Studio is that's fine. We got our accents, tomato. I think the very first thing you should do is you learn it by doing it. So the easiest data source to start with is Google Search Console. We all have access to that. So go to Google Search Console and just pull that data into Data Studio. And the reason you'll do that is because in the main UI, you have access to 1,000 rows of data. If you pull it into Data Studio, instantly you have access to 5,000 rows of data. So you've got 5 times as much data available to you if you just do that one step. And the tables for doing that are all very, very basic. And you're literally, something you can put together in 5-10 minutes. if you use the API, ultimately you get up to 50,000 rows of data, which is great. But just using Data Studio, which is free, gives you 5 times as much data. And the very first visualizations I would do after that is I do a question report, which I think works really well. So I put in a small case statement, which I can share with you, which basically allows me to filter my my incoming queries by who, which, how, why, and I can see what are the questions that people are asking when they're arriving on my site. And that's incredibly useful for creating content because it'll show you where you have not necessarily have a click, where you have an impression, where you're being seen in those Google results. So you can start to use that data to really do something functional with the support team, with the content team. So it's incredibly useful. So definitely start with Search Console would be the starting point I'd recommend.
Excellent. And another good reason too is because Google changed the Search Console entry URL the other week. So
yeah, that's also that's a thing.
Update all my bookmarks accordingly. Okay, great. Next question. Can you build a dashboard for comparing Google Analytics data versus SEMrush data? And what would be
Yes.
some great graphs to build and share with stakeholders and give suggestions, recommendations, action items? Pretty interesting because I get a lot of questions about the traffic data coming from SEMrush, right?
Yeah, this is, I mean, this is essentially what I've shown you with some of these graphs. So if you go and get the specific data, if you get the position tracking data, then you're going to get much more detailed data that you can then have in comparative views against your GA. But this is a whole reason why you use Data Studio, is so you can have different sources at a very top level. And I think that's what really works for me is that top level view. I do like I have some problems with the traffic data that you get from most of the SEO tools, because you have to remember that that is an estimation. And if you're comparing that estimation with your own data, with your own GA data, then it's kind of questionable whether you get any value out of that. I think it starts to have a value when you're looking at that for competitors. Then it's fine because you don't have any better data for them. But definitely, I very rarely compare SEMrush traffic data to my own GA data. I'd rather have my own GA data as gospel. But it is very useful to look at the positions, and especially those positions split is incredibly useful. So seeing when we make certain changes, do we get a larger number of keyword positions? And that's what we tend to see. So when you have, for example, if you've added schema to your site, then a really good visualization is looking at your traffic, but also looking at your number of positions that you're then seen for. You know, has that increased dramatically? Because you tend to get more exposure in the SERPs from doing that. So they've been some very useful visualizations for me.
Yeah, I also would think that it helps with timeline estimates as well, right? Because you always get the question like, how long is it going to take? How long is it going to take? And if you can pinpoint specific growth with changes, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe not all the changes at once, but if there is like a schema change that you implement or something like that, and then you start to see that there's growth that happens that starts after a certain time and then peaks accordingly, right? Or you have an uptick in, you know, feature snippets, results, et cetera, as a result of that, you can very easily, from just a chart perspective and a C-suite perspective, say, hey, look, we invested in this and we got this, right? And this is how long.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly right, Lauren. And yeah, and that's why I like Search Console data as well, because you often see things happening in positions, and then from SEMrush you'll see things happening in keyword positions. Sorry, Search Console you'll see impressions. So looking at those two areas, it often gives you an indication before you start to see traffic start to go up. So you're right, it's kind of justifying what you're doing to senior stakeholders. And this migration was actually a good example of that, because we're doing something that, again, it's a very, very large migration. It's involved a lot of people to do that kind of large tech change across a website. So the stakeholders really want to see that there's indications that things are going in the right direction, even if we know that a change of architecture at that level is going to take several months to really come through. So you're right, it's all about getting those kind of initial indications that those stakeholders want to see.
Excellent, thank you for that clarification. Next question. This is kind of funny because it's a reminder of how many different data sources Google has. So is there any way to import Google My Business data into Data Studio. And can you recommend any useful visualizations for doing that?
I have to admit, I've not done a lot with that data set at the moment. I'm pretty sure you can bring it in. There's a lot of third-party connectors that make your life very easy because they work on bringing that data in, and then they'll take that, and then you can take it from their connector into Data Studio. And Supermetrics definitely covers Google My Business. I know that for a fact. So I would be looking at Supermetrics to do that for me. So yeah, that's and yeah. So third-party connector, I think, is a way to go. The good thing
Yeah, I
about
also had another recommendation show up here in the questions for Google My Business. Curtis is recommending Jepto, Jepto, has a free connector, but he says it's super slow.
yeah, and this is the thing. So if you've got a cheap connector that's really slow, then see if you compare it up with the Extract Data connector, which is free. So you may end up with a really slow initial source, but you can bring it in, you can cache it in that connector, and then we've resolved your problem. So this is why the Extract Data connector is really kind of a hidden gem for people building dashboards, because you may be able to utilize a sort of poorer source, but do it in a much better way.
So speaking of Google Data Studio, Google Data Sources, one source that's fairly new to the world of organic would be Google Merchant Center. Do you have any experience bringing in the limited data that we have on the organic side from Merchant Center yet?
No, I've not really pulled that data in much, Lauren. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's not a data set I've worked with a lot.
No problem. No problem. Okay. Next question is, can you also import or look at competitor keyword performance as well using the SEMrush connector?
I think you can. That's a different data set. It's not the domain history data set. You can look at backlinks. They're basically expanding this all the time. So you can go into each connector. I'm pretty sure you can pull that data through. So what they've done is they've made everything that's available on the API is pretty much available within Data Studio. So you can definitely pull that on the API. You can pull it in Data Studio, and that seems to be where they are. There's a few differences between the two, but it's pretty much they've pretty much taken the API and translated it. Yeah, I think you'd be able to see that.
Okay, great. I have a lot of other fairly not too specific oriented questions, so get ready. Is it possible to pull data from multiple domains using one data source? For example, we have a client with 40 plus locations, and all of those different locations live on different domains. Can we pull the data for all together into one
Yes.
reporting suite?
That's exactly what I've just shown you how to do. Exactly that. So yeah, this is what I do with those migrations. So that's I've set up one of these data sources for the domain history data for every one of those domains. So I'm looking, for example, at my domain.ru in google.ru. I'm looking at, so you have the choice of looking at any domain in any version of Google, and you can set up all of those data sets individually, and then you can view them on a single page. And that's really the beauty of this approach, that you get that high level view. That's why I find that part of the SEMrush connector really useful, because I tend to be looking for that high level view of my own domains, or looking at competitor domains on one page in Data Studio. So that's absolutely possible. If you go through the steps in this tutorial, then you'd be able to do that.
Excellent. What about like, basic analytics reporting before tweaking it does things like, a lot of Siri or Apple search traffic is classified. A lot of Safari Search Classic is classified as direct, right? Because of Siri suggest. A lot of Yelp traffic, which has SEO intent, is classified as social. A lot of other sources, which may not be the intent of social media traffic, such as referrals and things like that, are classified as referral sites. Out of the box, Google Analytics does not include GMB referrals as being GMB. It's all bunched under organic search, right? So if I'm working with on a project where, say from an SEO perspective, I consider Yelp to be SEO traffic. I consider that to be a search engine. Is there a way to pull the referrals from the traffic from multiple different referral sources into one overarching, I guess, search report or SEO report that's customized in that fashion using Data Studio?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be a good use case for Data Studio, because you could be taking out, if you think back to how I did the blended data there, you can actually blend together up to 7 data sources. So if I was taking, if I had those specific views from GA, I could be filtering them down as however I wanted, segmenting them, whatever I wanted to do, and then blending them together to come up with a view that suited my business requirements. So maybe I wanted to reclassify or change different types of traffic to look as, to fit it all into one graph. So I mean, this is really why you would use Data Studios. It's very flexible because you can blend together data sources, you can blend together filtered data sources, however you want to cut and slice it, and then you also have the option with calculated fields, which is the one I did. Did a very, very basic calculated field there to add together those metrics for the different positions. You can add together data in that way as well. So you really have a lot of options within Data Studio to get the view that you want to get, and even up to including, if you have aggregated data that you can't work with, you can then put that through the extract connector, and that gives you additional options. And I know people do other things, even bring it into Google Sheets, you bring it into BigQuery, and you can start to manipulate the data. So any kind of use case that you have along those lines of getting a different view is incredibly useful. I mean, personally, in some of the reports that I've created in the past, I've merged actual data from API, from connectors with GA to, for example, Google Sheets data. So I've even had data that is completely offline, which it sounds a little bit strange for something that's so automated, that you wouldn't really want to do offline. But sometimes within a business, you may have data sets that are only that aren't available to anybody. And so in those cases, it's quite clever to use something like Google Sheets and to get those teams to manually fill out those data points and then try and bring them into a more automated workflow, so that hopefully further down the line you end up you automate everything, but with data you're kind of gradually improving it at every stage. So maybe it's slightly static, or some of it's filled in manually, because that's the only way you can get the data, and then along the line you make the business case for automating and integrating that data. So it really gives you there's a huge amount of flexibility with Data Studio. It's
interesting. I can see that. Yeah. I could see that being quite valuable with call tracking or service-oriented companies where that sale is done after in-person visits and that's being tracked in a separate CRM and things like that, right?
That's absolutely the use case, Lauren. That's actually, and yeah, looking at metrics behind call centers. What's the call center code? Sometimes this data is completely inaccessible, especially to the SEO team. It exists in another system away from us. We've got no access to it. So even getting those teams to give you top line data into Google Sheets then allows you to bring it into your Data Studio ecosystem. Yeah.
Excellent, good tips. Yeah, all about getting that proper attribution, especially on the Yelp side. I can't stand it when social media team tells me how much money they're bringing in and I look and it's just Yelp, not anything else. Okay, next question. Is there a way in domain analytics to select a device, desktop or mobile? And is it possible to choose on SEMrush? It is possible to choose on SEMrush, but it does not seem available for the Data Studio Connector.
So is there something that's available in the API? See, we've got three different views here within SEMrush. We have the view of the UI, which has a lot more options. So I mean, you can do a huge amount in the UI. We then have the view of the API, and that's where the SEMrush team spent a lot of time. And what they've tried to do is translate and bring over all the functions that are available in the API into the Data Studio connector. So that's basically the method they're taking. Whether that, I haven't used that specific data set. I'm actually just having a look now. But it's very easy. I mean, what you do is you go into the data set and start looking at the data sources, and this is kind of research you do in Data Studio, because every time you get access to a data set, we go back, I load up the data set, I go and see exactly what are the metrics that are available within it. So even if you're looking at Search Console, for example, you're going to have two different sets of data. So you have a URL set and you have a site set. And those two sets of data, even though they come from Search Console, they contain slightly different data, and they contain slightly different metrics. So, one has a landing URL, the other one has a query, but they don't quite relate. So a lot of what you're doing in Data Studio is loading up the different data sets and seeing exactly what's in them and what you can do. And then when you have the options, and there'll be many, dozens of options for every connector. And this is where Data Studio people get really excited, because we have more options, we have more graphs, there are more things we can do. So, it's just kind of digging into it and finding out what's available. I kind of focused a lot in this webinar specifically on the domain history data set, because that's one I've used a lot myself. So I want to kind of take you through that. But there are 7 other data sets within the domain analytics overall connector. So there's a lot to do there.
Awesome. Next question comes from Curtis Weigel, I believe, who's been pleasantly lighting up the question box. So thank you, Curtis.
Yep.
Do you have any experience of blending SEMrush organic data with PPC paid data to find opportunities where maybe you're wasting money or missing an opportunity? So the ability to compare your organic data from SEMrush with your paid data from Google Ads or whatnot to identify opportunities or wasted money could be maybe overlap, right? Branded overlap, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is, what you're trying to do here is your basic SEO PPC optimization tactic, isn't it? Where you're trying to see, where do I have very expensive CPCs and where do I have low organic placement? So can I increase my organic placement and then be a little less aggressive with the PPC positions? And that's a really good strategy. I mean, I use that a lot myself. It allows you then to not cut the budget from PPC teams, but it allows you to let them spend their budget a bit more effectively across places where you perhaps wouldn't want to put up organic content so fast. So yeah, absolutely. Within domain analytics, you get paid search positions, so you definitely could do that. It would be interesting, I think, to look at paid search positions against the organic positions I showed you. So having that sort of data alongside probably in tabular, in a table form would work. And I'd be looking for the differences, where, and probably by CPC, so you can even organize and sort that by CPC, because you'd want to be hitting the most expensive first. So that would be a very, I think that table would work. But yeah, I've not put that together myself. I might do it after this call, actually. But yeah,
nice.
Yeah. But that
what would you use as the join key? Would you use date as the join key, or what would you use?
It's a good question. You have to find out, what you could join it on in SEMrush. This is SEO on the fly. Yeah, kind of seeing what they've got in paid search positions. This is a paid search positions database. So we have, you have keyword in there, so you could do it even on the keyword. That would be a join key. I think I'd do it on keyword. That would make sense. Because you want keyword to relate to search term, don't you?
So if you happen to stay up tonight putting together this this table, please feel free to send us a screenshot. We'll send it to everybody. It's on.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would work. But yeah, be interesting. I mean, there's so much you can do with each of these data sources, and that's what I mean. You kind of get. I'm looking now at the paid search positions data set. So I've talked initially about domain history data set. So this is a whole nother data set, and then within that we have keywords, position, previous position, position difference, AdWords block, traffic percent, traffic cost, competition. So each one of these is a different metric. So you really just have to start playing around with these, but yeah, it's all about finding the right kind of recipe for these to meet what you're trying to do. But it's just, you know, the beauty of Data Studio is that you can just mess around with this yourself. When you have a bit of basic knowledge about Data Studio, you can start making these graphs and seeing if they work. And people are very, very willing to help you in Data Studio. So they'll always say, well, I think you need to do this or that. But it's something you can get into incredibly quickly. So you don't need to be a data analyst. You definitely don't need to be programming APIs or dealing with that. It's really very sort of plug and play. So I think this is why so many people are so excited about Data Studio at the moment, because it is an amazing tool for free. I think literally the negatives at the moment are all around performance, and I think that's what we're all kind of struggling with, how we can get it, you know, and speed it up for clients.
Excellent. We got a couple questions left before the end of the webinar. This one is about backlink data. So do you have any recommendations to get backlink history data into Data Studio to do one of these similar comparisons over time or whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, this again would be, this again is why you'd use something like SEMrush. So backlink data you're only going to get from your SEO tool, and all the SEO tools really at the moment are working on connectors for Data Studio. So if we look at the SEMrush one, we have domain, date, total backlinks, new backlinks, lost backlinks, you know, total referring domains, new referring domains, lost. So we have everything that we would expect in terms of putting those charts together. So you can definitely pull out backlink data. I mean, I'd probably say the thing to think about with Data Studio is that you probably don't want to make it into another application. It might be there eventually, but it's the use. I kind of started off from that perspective, but where I'm at now with Data Studio is it's better for really interesting merges, you know, merging of data, blending of data, and top line views for senior people, because you can, you know, everything that's in Data Studio, you can then email a PDF out to everyone every week. And the thing with data is it's all about how you actually use it. So, you know, how is it improving the workflow that different teams are making? So if you take something like that question and answer data, so we know the top questions that are asked in the data set every week, you can then send that to the customer teams, and then they've got an instant you know, source of information for them to write new content about, because I can see that there's high volume for these different terms. These are, you know, so it becomes very actionable. So, you know, think about who the recipients are of it. Don't get so obsessed with Data Studio that you're pulling everything into it just for yourself, for your own dashboard. And certainly in terms of viewing at links, I mean, I think I'd be more inclined to be using the UI of the SEO tool for that. But yeah, there could be some interesting blends. If you've got an interesting idea about what you'd like to see on those backlinks, you know, is it total number of backlinks versus keyword positions that have increased, or the number of keywords that have increased? Is it, you know, ranking positions 1 to 3 have increased against number of backlinks that you've got? I mean, maybe there's a view like that you want to see. But yeah, you've got a lot of options.
Well, it's also difficult because I don't think there's a backlink history tool that's flawless. Like whatever SEO tool I use, I'll see new links pop up and they're like from 2012, right? Or 2017, or the comment links from a long time ago. So it's like one of those things where if you're manually tracking your links that you know are powerful, maybe that's a way that you can bring them in as well, as opposed to some of the tool sets that are out there that might be a little bit slower.
Yeah, I tend to be like that. I mean, I don't. I tend to struggle a bit with backlinks because some of my clients have, you know, say 950 million backlinks. So it's a little bit hard to get a lot of data out of that's usable. So yeah, I don't tend to do too much with backlinks, but it's you're right, it varies enormously. And one thing I've learned about SEO tools, because I have access to quite a few of them, and you've got the same, Lauren, is that they all show you a different view. So yes, that's quite alarming to people when they first realize that, because they have one tool and they think this is the source of truth, and then they realize that every single tool gives them a different viewpoint.
Speaking of new tools and new data that's available, do you know yet if Search Console crawl stat data can be exported and connected to Studio?
It would be wonderful if it could. That would be fantastic. I think I mean, actually, the amount that you can get out from from Search Console is very little at the moment, and this is why the more people who get into Data Studio, the better, because we can start to put pressure onto Google to say, you know, why can we not pull data out of one Google product into another Google product? It seems pretty much a no-brainer. And you know, the more people who use Data Studio, the more pressure they'll have to do this. Something that we've always wanted to have. I mean, having crawl data coming out would be brilliant. The big issue I've already found with the crawl data is obviously it's only keeping it for a very short amount of time. So you don't have the history on that. So if we could pull that out and store it, that would be very useful. And even if you were storing that in Google Sheets, or you were able to store that in, you know, or even in the Google Connect up to 100 meg, but storing in Google Sheets would be great. Being able to store it in BigQuery. A lot of people are starting to export Search Console data now into BigQuery. That's becoming very popular. So we'd definitely do the same with crawl data if we could.
Maybe when Google takes crawl stats out of the settings section of Search Console, we'll be ready for prime time. I kind of like how they've hidden it. It took me forever to find it.
Yeah, that was everyone on Twitter going, "This is great. I haven't got this report," and then everyone had to realize it was the most hidden report that they've ever seen. So yeah, go to settings. Underneath settings, you'll see a little button which lets you see your crawl data. It's very hidden.
It is very hidden. It's almost as hidden as a disavow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is, well, done a little bit of work on that, which is great. But yeah, I did wonder why that was hidden so much, because I think that could be amazingly useful. I'm a huge fan at the moment of sorting out the crawling of larger websites, because that's when I'm seeing the biggest gains. Just, you know, making sure all the basics are in place. You know, your sitemap's in place, the crawling is going through, you know, a JavaScript driven site, you know, can you actually crawl the whole of the site? Just getting these things in place is really useful. So yeah, I think we're all kind of getting these sites in shape for next year at the moment, and so there's been a lot of kind of technical SEO going on with brands, and so yeah, that report has become at a really good time, and also for many SEOs, because we love the idea of log files, but trying to get log files is insanely difficult. So you know, having some access now through Search Console to that view is really useful.
Agreed. Yep, I've been denied on log files many times. So
many times.
It's very nice to have it available. Nick, thank you so much. Just as a reminder for everyone, we are going to be making this video available. I believe we'll be making your presentation slides available as well. We had a lot of questions about that, just for folks that had to jump off or whatnot. So as a reminder, we will be doing a wrap up. If there's any specific questions we didn't get to, we'll be shooting them over to Nick, get a nice little answer from them. And then if you happen to put together the PPC and
yeah, I'll go and have a go at
that search comparison this evening, yeah, maybe we can have a glimpse of that as well. But again, thank you again. It's been really eye-opening for me. I'm a Google Data Studio beginner, so I just have so many ideas floating around in my head right now, how I can just save time at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And answer questions instantly, which is always a plus too. So thanks again. Nick, would you like to say anything about Torque partnership or anything before we sign off?
No, I'm very happy if anyone wants to talk to me about technical SEO, then come have a chat. But yeah, I'll be available. I'll have a go at a few of these tables. But if anyone gets stuck going through the slides and they're trying to replicate any of this, then just send me a question. I'll be more than happy to answer it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Our next SEJ webinar is with Entheve Interactive on December 16th, 2 p.m. We'll be talking about optimizing your SEO resource stack, what you really need and getting rid of what you don't at the end of the day. It's that time of the year, right? We get our bills, we get our renewals and everything else. So it's a nice time to purge and invest in what you're actually using. So I just upgraded our SEMrush yesterday, by the way. Not necessarily plug.
I'll say on that
I was hitting that keyword limit quite a bit.
You do. The keyword gets limited, and the other really useful thing with obviously bringing it into Data Studio is that you don't need to worry about seeds, because you know, if you're obviously bringing your data into Data Studio, you can make that accessible to more people. So that's something else to consider as a value saving with it.
Excellent. I think we're gonna be expecting more information from you about Data Studio in the future. So looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Also, as a reminder, SEJE Summit 2021 is going to be January 12th and 13th. It's a 2-day virtual event, virtual conference. Day 1 has 5 tracks of everything from SEO to PPC to social to even legal advice on the content side of things and content marketing. So, and then day 2 is a series of master classes. So please just search for SEJE Summit. You'll find all the information, and feel free to register now before tickets sell out. Nick, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's been great catching up over the past couple of weeks as well. Really appreciate you taking the time, staying up late to be on this webinar.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you, Nick. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.